Let's touch on this immediately. Professional wrestling is an amazing one-take stunt show that happens in front of a live audience with no cuts, no stunt doubles, no breaks. Honestly, the fact that the stories we're about to discuss are few and far between is kind of a miracle. And back in the days of kayfabe, where you had to protect the legitimacy of the event at all costs, it made sense to do what you could to finish the match, but, you know, we've all been to the puppet show, we've seen the strings, and one of the things that surprises people the most about pro wrestling audience is the fact that we want it to look like people are getting hurt. We don't want to see them actually getting hurt. And the disappointment of a match getting stopped for a legitimate reason isn't close to how we'd feel if someone made their situation considerably worse for our entertainment. I'm Singer Siete for 7 Wrestling. Let's take a look at 7 matches that should have been stopped. Now, before we get into this, we appreciate your support, so if you enjoy this video, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and skull-crushing finale that notification bell. Also, we've got merch, brother. If you'd like to show you're a part of the 7 Nation Army, wait, that would totally get us sued. If you'd like to show that you're a part of the 7 Universe, there it is. Pick up your merch today. Number 1, Kurt Angle versus The Rock versus Triple H, SummerSlam 2000. There are some title reigns that are just kind of there. The champ isn't involved in any specific feud, he just kind of winds his way through other people's storylines. Good example of that is what's going on with LA Knight today. Just seems like he's taking on random dudes and occasionally being a side character in the Andrade versus Carmelo Hayes feud. Another example of this is when The Rock won the WWE title at King of the Ring 2000. The title had kind of bounced around after Triple H and The Rock traded a few times post-WrestleMania. The Rock finally claimed it for good in a 6-man tag team match between The Rock, The Undertaker, and Kane against Triple H, Vince McMahon, and Shane McMahon. Wow, those are crazy uneven teams. If someone on The Rock's team won, they'd claim the belt, and The Rock managed to pick up the win and the title. From there, The Rock was kind of shoehorned into other programs. He worked with Chris Benoit in a very good match at Fully Loaded, but that feud would be put on hold immediately afterward and seemed to be pointing more towards some kind of Chris Benoit versus Mick Foley situation. And come SummerSlam, Benoit was paired off with Jericho for the 100th time, so The Rock was kind of shoehorned into a triple threat match with the hottest story at the time, the love triangle between Triple H, Stephanie McMahon, and Kurt Angle. We'd later learn that going after people's wives was very in character for our Olympic gold medalist. In the build to the match, Kurt would even plant a smoocheroo on the billion-dollar princess, and during the video package that introduced this match, the production team would have a little bit of fun and add fireworks to the video, you know, like an Instagram filter before those completely ruined our concept of reality. Before the match, Sexy Kurt, he'll make your ankle hurt, would take the mic and tell Triple H how he gave Stephanie the passion that he never could. As you'd imagine, Hunter was not pleased. He jumped Kurt before the bell, before The Rock had even made his entrance. They brawled for a bit, and then this happened. Yikes. The table gave way, and Hunter pedigreed Angle onto the arena floor from a few feet in the air. Kurt was not okay. He was taken to the backstage area while The Rock and Triple H, who had wrestled each other roughly infinity times at this point, just kind of improvised a match without Kurt. But Kurt would come back, and again, he was still not okay. To hear Angle tell it on the Kurt Angle show, Stephanie had to walk him through the next several parts of the match, telling him what to do, and then once he was in the ring, The Rock and Triple H could kind of lead him. Scarier than that is the fact that Kurt would admit that he remembers nothing from that night and regained consciousness 4 hours after the end of the show. He took bumps, he threw other wrestlers. This was a really dangerous situation for everyone involved, and oddly enough, the finish was The Rock pinning Triple H, so they could have just finished the match and picked up the storyline at Raw or SmackDown when Kurt was more able to perform. We'd hope a different decision would be made today, knowing all we know about head injuries, but sometimes. Number 2, The Undertaker vs. Goldberg, Super Showdown 2019. Honestly, Goldberg's matches are so short, how hard is it to screw that up? Kidding. I know that professional wrestling is a complex mechanism of near misses, hitting hard in safe places, and all that jazz, you know. But shit happens. And shit happened all over the kingdom of Jeddah when they paid these legends a combined $1 jillion to square off in their first ever one-on-one match against each other. Wow. All the money that's getting thrown around over there, you know Hogan is so mad that he can't get booked anymore. Come on, brother. Let me drop the leg drop on Braun Strowman. Back on track. These two really didn't have to do too much sometimes. It's just cool to see two guys in the ring who've never wrestled before. But they went out there and tried to give Saudi Arabia its insane amount of money's worth. Started out with Goldberg walking to the ring, already with a little bit of blood on his forehead. Apparently, this is the result of his pregame ritual of banging his head against a door. He'd later admit that he knocked himself out before going to the ring, which, call me crazy. Why? Why put this multi-million-dollar spectacle and your health and another man's health at risk for a stupid pregame ritual that nobody sees? He'd say it's because he needs to psych himself up, while, Sir Laurence Olivier might say something like, "My dear boy, why don't you try acting? It's much easier." Sorry. Undertaker had his usual fantastic entrance, and then it was on. Started with Goldberg spamming spears like he had a cheat code for unlimited specials in WCW NWO Revenge. Then a rest hold. Smart. These two are not spring chickens. And then it would all go south when Goldberg would run headfirst into a ring post. Although, in the ring post defense, it was close friends with the door that Goldberg had headbutted earlier. Ooh, and he got it good. Busted wide open. You had to know something was off because Goldberg had never sold this much in his entire life. I will say this though, I'd do my best to tough it out for that check too. But everybody's got a price. It looked like they'd gotten everything back on track, but then Goldberg would nearly kill the dead man with the ugliest jackhammer of all time. Wait, can you kill a dead man? Who knows? He certainly came horrifyingly close. And if you're keeping score at home, that's 2 concussions. Goldberg would later confirm that he knocked himself silly twice. Look, I get that The Undertaker and Goldberg are beloved legends and they would have straight up murdered that ref if he had stopped the match, but this was legitimately scary, as in not good scary like, the Dawn of the Dead remake, Fight Me. For the finish, Goldberg would try to pick Taker up for a tombstone, which, given the state he's in, there's no way I'm letting that dude hold me upside down. Taker would just fall to the ground, hit a waist-high chokeslam, and then call it a day. Later, The Undertaker would say that this was a very scary match to be in, and he was disappointed in himself for not being able to work around Goldberg knocking himself out twice. Oh, come on, don't beat yourself up there, Taker. He did it to himself, and besides, beating himself up is apparently his thing. Number 3, Matt Hardy vs. Sammy Guevara, All Out 2020. There's an art to the chair shot. I know oftentimes it looks like they're just cracking each other with the furniture, but the goal is to have a nice, even swing, connecting with the concave part of the seat where the person sits. That makes the hit have as much surface area as possible to make the impact less severe. Ooh, spilling secrets. I feel like these guys. I mean, it's still going to hurt, but you're not going to get injured. Probably not going to get injured. Anyhow, that's probably the safest, most accepted way to do it. This is another way to do it. Not shocking that this ended up with Matt Hardy busted open and not happy. It later got out that Sammy Guevara was supposed to throw a different chair, which maybe make sure you've got the safe chair next time, buddy. And maybe this was all just a harbinger of things going horribly wrong in this feud and they should have just called it quits. But nah. Instead, we got the Broken Rules match at All Out 2020, which is basically a last man standing match that starts in the Jacksonville Jaguars end zone, which is a wildly specific stipulation. The duo would brawl backstage, with both of them eventually ending up on top of a scissor lift. Guevara would spear Hardy off of the lift through 2 tables, and Hardy hit the back of his head on the concrete floor. He was out. Now normally, just count him down and get him some help, but the stipulation was that if Matt Hardy lost, he'd have to leave AEW. Still, count the dude out and worry about it later. It's not like wrestling organizations have ever held fast and true to their stipulations. Right, John Cena? Hardy would probably have a blasty blast coming up with some kind of new character to come back as, but instead, they continued the match with Guevara dragging Hardy's limp body around. It was so difficult to watch. Hardy managed to get some shots in to knock Guevara down, but instead of staying down a la Owen Hart at SummerSlam 97, dude got up to continue the match. When it was shown that Matt literally could not walk, official Aubrey Edwards threw up the X and finally stopped the match. Oh yeah, if someone's really hurt, the referee will make an X sign with their arms to get help. Ooh, more secrets. So, an unfortunate end to what was going to be an exciting match, but hey, health comes first, right? Wrong! Matt must have convinced them that he was good to go because the match was immediately restarted. They'd eventually climb up a scaffolding so Matt could throw Sammy through a gimmicked floor and end this nightmare. Ugh. And the backlash was immediately, especially because AEW had the reputation as the company that truly cared about its wrestlers. Tony Khan claimed that Matt Hardy was cleared by the ring doctors, but my goodness, that turnaround was really quick. Khan would later tweet out that Matt Hardy didn't suffer a concussion, but Matt's controversial wife, Rebby Sky, would disagree, and Matt would later confirm that he was in fact concussed. Some good would come of this, though, as it did encourage AEW to institute new, stricter concussion protocols. Number 4. Shane McMahon vs. Kurt Angle, King of the Ring 2001. Non-wrestling fans who watched the Netflix McMahon documentary were probably pretty shocked. The affairs, the scandals, the literal crimes. However, for longtime fans like me, and I'm assuming you, there weren't really a ton of surprises, but my one takeaway was how hard Shane McMahon was working to try to earn his father's respect. All the crazy stunts he'd pull off were a way to earn the approval he desperately desired, but wasn't receiving from his father, which, as someone who never really earned his father's approval, it hits pretty deep. If only I had a crash pad. But for all of Shane's breathtaking falls, and there were quite a few of them over the years, the most brutal match he ever had didn't involve any crazy falls at all. It was at the King of the Ring 2001 when Shane McMahon, the then storyline owner of WCW, would square off against the Olympic gold medalist and former WWE champion Kurt Angle. And mind you, this was pretty early in Shane's career. Originally, when the McMahon stepped into the ring, it was expected that they would get their clocks cleaned. It's not like later when Vince McMahon would go 50-50 with Hulk Hogan at WrestleMania. We all expected Shane to get killed, and, in a way, he almost was. To make the bout somewhat even, Kurt had earlier participated in the King of the Ring tournament that would be won by Edge. Also, it was a street fight, so both were free to use weapons, and we assumed the superstars of WCW would get involved. What we got was the second most insane match in King of the Ring history, which is saying something. Weapons, blood, Shane hitting a friggin' shooting star press, and guess what? That's all before things got crazy. The duo would make their way back to the pay-per-view set. Oh, you see, kiddos, back in old Senior Siete's day, each event had its own unique entrance mood. Check out Backlash's cool swinging hooks. Sorry, Kurt would go to belly-to-belly suplex Shane through some gimmicked glass and wouldn't quite get all of it. Shane would slide down the glass and his head would hit the arena floor with a sickening thud. I remember watching this at the time and being very legitimately concerned. Angle would try again and this time would be successful. And since it worked out so well before, they did the exact same theme, except through the other side of the panes of glass. But the glass simply would not break. Poor Shane being dropped on his head time after time. Finally, Angle just decides to chuck him through the glass head first. It would later be learned that the team in charge of preparing the stunt didn't install super fragile sugar glass like you'd see in a Hollywood action film. They installed plexiglass. In a Reddit AMA, Angle would say, "I knew something was wrong immediately. I mean, we were told earlier in the day, listen, don't go near the glass. No pyro tonight, no fireworks because this is sugar glass. It'll break, it'll crack, it'll ruin the whole gimmick of the match." They said it was sugar glass, but it was actually plexiglass. If I had known that, we never would have gone through it. According to Angle, Shane ended up with 50 to 60 stitches from this failed stunt, and they both ended up in the hospital. And while a lot of matches on this list are things that a referee should have noticed and put a stop to, this is one that Vince McMahon reportedly was desperate to end, giving the referee pretty heated instructions to end the match. On the Steve Austin podcast, Shane would explain what happened. "Vince thinks that I was shooing him off, that I was disobeying an order through Kyoto, but I never really got the order. He was so mad again because he felt I was disobeying an order, I just didn't get the message." The match finished a bit later with more weapon shots and a very impressive angle slam off the top rope. Ironically, when it was all over, Shane got the same speech from Vince that Mick Foley had gotten 3 years earlier, which was basically how great it was and to never do it again. Number 5. Candace Michelle vs. Beth Phoenix, Monday Night Raw. People often forget that it isn't just the wrestlers in the ring who put on a great match, it's the guy or gal in the striped shirt that helped them achieve that goal. Relaying communications between the wrestlers, getting messages from the back, sometimes taking a bumper to themselves, they're an integral part to the magic of the show. And sometimes they need to perform the same duties that a referee would perform in an actual contest. If a participant is too injured to continue, stopping a match can be the difference between an injury and a much worse injury. That was the case when Candace Michelle squared off against Beth Phoenix for the WWE Women's title on the October 22, 2007 episode of Monday Night Raw. Candace would climb to the top when Beth would hit the ropes to cause her to fall. Generally, a wrestler will crotch themselves or fall across the ropes in this situation, but Candace managed to catch her ankles and fall straight down onto her face in a horrific scene. Referee Mike Chioda would check on Candace and would seem to communicate with Beth, all before she grabbed Candace by the head and dragged her to the center of the ring, which is a terrible idea. Moving someone who has taken a blow to the head can be extremely dangerous, especially if there's a risk of spinal or brain injury. It can worsen spinal damage, potentially causing paralysis or exacerbating brain swelling and bleeding. On the Rewind Recap Relive show, Chioda would say that he got in big trouble over this, saying, "I said just cover her. She was enough out of the corner, but Beth didn't know she was hurt, and she pulled her by the hair and dragged her out. I had so much heat from Vince that I should have called the match. She wasn't concussed, but she was knocked out. She wound up fracturing her collarbone. I should have called it." Chioda would go on to say that this was from a time when concussion protocols really weren't much of a thing, and the workers would find a way to finish the match and deal with the injuries afterwards. Sadly for Michelle, she would aggravate the injury in her comeback match, this time shattering her clavicle in 4 places, and would be released from the WWE in June of 2009. Number 6. Bob Holly vs. Brock Lesnar, SmackDown. Bob Holly, also known as Hardcore Holly, sometimes known as Bob Sparkplug Holly, occasionally referred to as Thurman Sparky Plug, and on the rarest of rare occasions, known as Bombastic Bob, had a reputation for kind of being an asshole. This often led to him being perceived as difficult to work with by some of his peers. Here are some key factors that contributed to this perception. Holly was often seen as a locker room enforcer, someone who would police the locker room to ensure the younger talent respected the veterans. One of the most infamous examples of this is the incident with Matt Cappotelli, a contestant on WWE's reality show Tough Enough. Holly legitimately beat up Cappotelli during a practice match, leaving him with a black eye and a bloody nose. Holler later defended his actions, stating he was trying to toughen up Cappotelli, but it sparked considerable backlash at the time. So, it wasn't out of line to think that Holly would do something to mess with a new guy in the ring. And when that new guy is Matt Cappotelli, that's one thing, but when the new guy is Brock Lesnar, well, that's quite another. On the September 12, 2002 episode of SmackDown, the Hardcore One was slated to go against the next big thing and current WWE champion in a singles match. The match was snug, hard-hitting, probably something both of those guys liked, and it would be unremarkable if not for the moment when Lesnar picked up Holly for a powerbomb. There was some kind of miscommunication, and Lesnar proceeded to drop Holly right on the back of his head, thus breaking his neck. And what's amazing is the match goes for a few minutes after that, with Holly hitting a sweet-ass dropkick and Lesnar polishing him off with an F5. Popular theory at this time was Holly was trying to stick it to the fast-rising Lesnar by sandbagging him on the powerbomb. Oh, sorry, sandbagging is when you make yourself intentionally heavy to make your opponent look bad. But Holly would say it was simply just a botched move. What happened was we had been wrestling for about 10 minutes. Brock, he was sick and we're both blown up, and he went to pick me up to powerbomb me, and I tried to come up, I tried to grab his head and I couldn't quite reach it, and he ended up, we ended up going back down and he tried to hold me and that was it. Holly would say that Lesnar apologized 100 times over and would call him in the hospital so there's no bad blood between the two. A little over a year later, Holly would return to the ring looking for vengeance. He'd square off against Lesnar for the WWE title at the Royal Rumble and get squished in a little over 6 minutes. Well, that certainly wasn't bombastic at all. Number 7. The Miz vs. John Cena, WrestleMania 27. We often hear about how Steve Austin finished his match against Owen Hart after suffering a horrific neck injury from a botched sit-down tombstone piledriver, or how Triple H took a Walls of Jericho on the announce table, was able to run in to finish the match after he'd torn a quad. And yes, those are amazing feats, but neither of them happened during the main event of WrestleMania. WrestleMania 27 is an easily forgettable event. The Triple H Undertaker match would be overshadowed by their effort the following year in Hell in a Cell. The Jerry Lawler versus Michael Cole fiasco was arguably the worst non-Giant Gonzalez match in the history of the Showcase of the Immortals. And the main event of The Miz versus John Cena was completely overshadowed by John Cena's blossoming feud with The Rock, who was that year's special guest host. Now, before you youngsters ask why anyone should care about a match between The Miz and John Cena, know that around this era, The Miz had done a fantastic job positioning himself as a top heel. However, after he cashed in his Money in the Bank briefcase against Randy Orton, they didn't give him any decisive victories over any big names. In fact, his biggest feud was with, let me check my notes, old ass announcer Jerry the King Lawler. Good job, guys. Anyhow, the WWE figured they could get The Miz over by giving him an entrance that would appeal to 4-year-olds everywhere with his unique bounce house look. Maybe it worked, I don't know, I'm not 4. But over the course of the underwhelming match, The Miz would be tackled over the barricade onto the arena floor and hit his head really hard, and it was obvious The Miz was out of it. His eyes were completely glazed over. The referee would hit a 10 count on both of them, and for the first time ever, WrestleMania would end in a double countout. But the People's Champ would use his hosting powers to insist that the match would restart with no disqualifications and no countouts. This wasn't going to be so bad. The Rock would hit his finish on John Cena, and The Miz just had to pick up the pin, easy peasy, mac and cheesy. But either nobody noticed or nobody was able to get word to The Rock because he came back and dropped The Miz with a spinebuster and a people's elbow. Ugh. A WWE 24 documentary would touch on this instance with some very eerie footage of The Miz backstage immediately following the show. Here he admits that he doesn't remember the match at all. Biggest night in his life, he doesn't remember it. Fortunately, The Miz would be fine and would go on to make millions of dollars, star in movies, have his own reality TV show, have a huge house, 2 wonderful daughters, and a smoking hot wife. Well, there's our list. Did we forget any other matches that should have been stopped? If so, please leave them in the comments section below. Also, if you enjoyed this, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and rock bottom that notification bell. Until next time, I'm Singer Siete for 7 Wrestling saying bye-bye.